Awesome. I think we got everyone. So I want to welcome everyone to this month's, or actually we have 3 webinars this month. So welcome everyone to our second webinar this month, which is on AP and GL approval tips and tricks. Carol has put this together. She has put a lot of work into this presentation to go through the GL and AP process. We have previously gone through the purchasing one. Carol did that one as well about a month and a half ago and did a great job there. If you do want to see that one and have any questions, I can send you the link on that. That's posted on our YouTube channel, so feel free to go out to our YouTube channel. But if you need the link for that presentation, just put in your email address in the questions feature in the GoToWebinar. So with that, Carol, can you advance to the next slide? It'll actually make the transition a little easier. Perfect. So the presentation is about 30 to 45 minutes. The phone lines are muted, but again, if there's any questions you have during this time, use the questions feature. So if you need a link, use the questions feature. If you have a question, use the questions feature. But also, if you want to copy the PowerPoint at the end, use the questions feature. Best way to communicate with us because we have a large number of people on today's call. So without any further ado, I am just going to simply turn this right over to Carol. And who starts off with a great joke. So awesome, Carol, all yours.
Thank you, Stuart. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's webinar. And I just want to go through, we're going to go through the accounts payable and journal entry approvals process and just share some tips and tricks along the way. So please do ask questions and then Stuart will ask them or he will try to answer them as I go along. And without further ado, we're going to start with the accounts payable approval flow. And these are just some of the reasons that is important to set up approvals in Sage Intacct. Number one, we no longer have to hunt people down to sign off on invoices before we can get ready to pay the vendors. And then the second piece is Intacct keeps track of the whole audit trail in one place, in one central location. And the cool thing with that is we can actually run reports and even for auditing purposes, this is good to provide to auditors to see when things are approved in the system and who approved them. It's also a good way to segregate duties where you have some people submitting the invoices and then another person approving them or multiple people approving the invoices, depending on the nature of how each business or each AP process is set up. It's always different from customer or client to client. The other powerful thing about Intacct is we're able to set up multiple levels of approvers, and I will show you what those look like. Then the other more important issue as well is we're able to catch issues up front. If we don't have approvals set up in accounts payable, if I was to submit an invoice and there's no approval flow, it can go straight and be paid and nobody looked at the GL account coding, nobody looked at the attachment, nobody looked at whether a project, the right project or the, the right cost code, if you will. Nobody really checks any of that. So having these approvals in place helps us catch issues, helps us get the invoices updated to the right coding so that we don't have to do a lot of reclassing later on, and also to make sure that they are linked to the right entities, if you will, to pay from. So these are some of the good reasons as to why to set up accounts payable approvals in Sage Intacct. And then this is just a quick overview of what the audit trail looks like. I mentioned Intacct does keep the audit trail in one place. If you look at the bottom, if this was 10 people that needed to approve this invoice, Intacct will keep that whole audit trail of who the person, who the approver is, and whether they approved it or not, the date that they approved it, and also it also shows us under the state field, it shows us who the invoice is submitted to. This is helpful so that if somebody is taking a while to move the invoice to the next queue, this is where we can quickly come and look at who is holding in, if you will, the invoice, and so we can alert that person to go in and either approve or decline so that the invoice keeps moving on to the queue of the approval flow. So that's just what the audit trail summary looks like. This can also be created into our report if we wanted to see this into an Excel or export the approvers into Excel. This AP bill approval history can be created into an Excel. And then the last good piece is the comment section, which is the very last column. This is helpful because it shows us whether if an invoice was declined, for example, then this is where you type in the comment as to why it was declined. And so you can read those comments and they are held in history as well. And so the biggest part, even before we can put in an approval flow together, we have to determine what that flow would look like. So I put this together. It looks daunting, but it's really not. And the key pieces here as just the boxes that are highlighted in green. This is where we would plug in the approval flows. So at the highest level, we have an invoice, we push it into Intacct, and invoices can come in through APIs, whether they're integrated with other systems, or we can enter them manually, or we can bulk import them. Those are the main ways we can put in invoices in Intacct. So an invoice comes in, it gets coded, it's submitted for approval. Then the second piece is, the second box is the invoice moves into an approver's queue. This is great because during the course of the day, the PM or the manager or the controller or whoever is responsible for approving it on the first step, their queue keeps piling up with invoices to approve. The good thing is that approver can receive email notifications so that they are alerted through their busy day of meetings and whatnot to go into Sage Intacct AP and approve the invoices as they're flowing in through the queue. So this way you have visibility and also a reminder. The email notifications are not required. It's an option. If we don't want to see a lot of emails, we can turn them off. We just need to remember to go in as an approver occasionally or throughout the day to keep approving what's in our queue. Then once the first person approves it, then we either approve or decline. If you approve it, it moves on to the next queue, to the next person in line to approve it, if there's multiple people. If it gets declined, which is where we are in red, then we need to put in a comment and explain why we're declining it. And then it goes straight back to the person who created the invoice in the first place. They also can be alerted through an email saying, hey, your invoice has not been approved, and this is why. So go in, update it, make the change, and then resubmit it. So let's say I had submitted the invoice, I'll get the email, I'll look at the comment, which means I don't even need to reach out to the approver with an email asking them why they declined it. All that is held in Intacct. Then I make the change, whether it's like a wrong GL account or I forgot to put in an attachment, whatever the case might be. Then I push it again through the queue. Then the approver reapproves it. Then if there was a second approver in that process, they hopefully approve it. Then the invoice is ready for payment. And then come on check processing day, the invoice gets paid. Then the other piece that we can introduce approvals is also on the payment. So you have the bill that was approved. We can also approve the payment. In this case, somebody in accounts payable would run the check processing process. And then right before a check is cut, for example, or an ACH payment is released, then all these invoices that have been processed for payment would go into an approver's queue as well. And then this person would now need to release those payments by, if they approve them. Then once the payments are approved, then the checks can be processed, and then the ACH invoices the ACH file can be generated from Intacct and pushed to the bank. So those are the two areas for accounts payable approval. Any questions so far?
No questions so far.
Okay, sounds good. I'll move along. Then so the first thing, as I mentioned, is to determine what that workflow needs to look like and who needs to approve. And so how we set that up in Intacct is we can either set it up as a value meaning a dollar threshold. So in other words, how many people do we need to set up and what threshold should we give them? The second option we can set up an approval flow is through a department. And let me just add on here as a tip. I've heard this question a few times where people have asked, "Hey, can I set up an approval flow based or linked to a project or a job?" And so right now the answer is no. However, one of the ways we can do this is when we're adding a project or a job in the construction projects module, we can link that project to a department. And so let's say we have 10 projects that are linked to the construction department, for example. Then those 10 projects would have the construction department, and then we would have a manager for that department. So anything that would be processed for that project would go straight to the construction department manager queue for approval. So that's how we can circumvent that piece. Another way we can set up an approval is through a particular person's name. So if we have a PM or a manager or an AP supervisor or whoever that person becomes can be given permissions to approve. And we can also have a mixture of all three, depending on how complicated we want to get. So without further ado, let me show you what each one of them looks like. And so this is just a snippet of what the value approval would look like. So whoever has level 1 approval, as you can see in the section below, whoever has level 1 approval granted on their preference, they would approve up to $1 million. And then whoever has a level 2 approval can approve anything $1 million and above. If let's say an invoice or subcontract invoice was for 1.5 million, it would have to go through both approvers, level 1 and 2. In this case, as you can see on the last column that says a minimum approver of 2, this means that 2 people have to approve an invoice with a dollar value of 1,000 up to $1 million. So if let's say Stuart and I are the 2 approvers, then if we get an invoice of 500,000, a subcontract invoice, let's say we're buying material for 500,000, I have to approve it and Stuart would have to approve it. If it's level 2, if it's the 1.5 million, for example, 3 people would have to approve it. So technically that invoice would be approved by 5 people. So it's a combination. So this is where, depending on how complex we want to get, we can have it go through a lot of people, or we can minimize the dollar thresholds and have it just go through 1 person. It's just a preference of how we want to set it up. But that's one option. The second option is the department-based that I had briefly mentioned. This allows us to code all invoices related to a particular department into that department. So if we have 10 departments, for example, or 4 departments, then we have we can have an approver for each department and route them. So anything hitting the GC world goes through a particular person. Anything hitting the estimating world goes through a particular person. Anything hitting the commercial real estate world, for example, or a particular department goes through a different person. That's the beauty of having the departments in this case. And it's not just department, it's department and a dollar threshold. So as you can see here, I set one up where Stuart would approve from 0 to 19,000, and then Dom would approve from 20,000 and above. So if an invoice is for 2,000, it would only go through Stuart. If an invoice is for 70,000, it would go through Stuart and Dom in this case, coded to the 3,000 department only in this scenario. That's the department route. The other option is, at the simplest form, is if we just needed 1 approver. And we've seen these cases too. All invoices would have to flow through this person, regardless of the dollar amount, whether it's a 5 million or 2 cents. This person would approve everything, and they would be the main approver for all invoices. That's the simplest form that we have seen. But we can also combine a mixture or have a cocktail, if you will. So on the first line, that would be the transaction by department. So if we have like the 4 departments, we would have who approves for each department and their dollar thresholds. We can also have the value approval, so that if an invoice is more than $1 million, it hits that person, whoever would be a CFO or a CEO or a PM, whoever that person would be assigned to. So you get a mixture of both. So, and that's the beauty of having the mix of the approval policies, if you will, in Intacct. So we're not just limited to one, we can combine them. And those are the 3 main ways we can set up the approval flows. And so I just wanted to show an example of what that looks like as a screenshot. In this case, I do have a $2,000 invoice here for this project, if you will, and it was just buying some material. And then as you can see on the second screenshot, it is submitted, and it's submitted to one approver because it's less than it's in this case for the GC department, for the general construction world, the approvals were, Stuart would approve from 0 to 19,999. And since this is less than that amount, it doesn't need to go to the second approver. On a similar note, when we have an invoice that's over 20,000, then this would need to go through both people. And as you can see on the second screenshot, it has to go through, it's submitted to Stuart right now, and then Dom would have to approve it as well. And then it also tags on the dates of when each person approved it as well, or declined it, and then reapproved it again. Any questions so far? Okay.
Nope, not yet. Nope.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, we shall keep on moving. So that would be the AP, that would be the invoicing process. Now this is the payment approval. So in this case, we can also set up levels of thresholds. This is the only one we get to choose. So we don't get the departments here. This is just all payments go through this level. So if, for example, anything below 50,000 gets approved by level 2, for example, and it's one person. And then anything above 500,000 gets approved by level 3, if you will, is all this is saying. Or we can just set one approval of 0, and all payments are approved by that one person or 2 people, or however many people we decide to put on the approvers column, and also grant permission in Intacct to do that. That's as simple as that on the payments. And then we're going to move over from accounts payable into the general ledger approvals. Just symbolized by this picture, we're just routing things to different people so that they can review and then keep moving the entries along. It's very similar to AP, where we apply departments or by a value threshold. In the GL world, it's really not by department, it's really by the journals. And what I mean by that is this. On the left side, we're gonna have some journal entries that are cash related, and that's cash coming in, cash going out. We may also have some with entries that we might wanna do. We may have just some general journal entries as well, or we may have some entries that are where we're just project related information. And that can be where something is coded to the wrong cost code, cost type, for example. And then we may just have recurring entries that do not need an approval. So whereas in AP we had the departments or the value, in the GL it's really based on the nature of the entry, if you will. If it's payroll related, that would be a payroll journal that holds all the payroll journal entries. Then somebody, whether it's in HR or in accounting, would approve those. We would assign who would approve those journal entries, if you will. So then essentially that's what the journal entry side world looks like. And just to show you an example of the audit trail or a proof of example, as you can see, I created this journal entry. And as you can see under action, I submitted it to Stuart, who is set up to approve the entries in the general journal. As you can see at the name at the top, GJ. Then he approved it, and you can see the approval, and then you can also see it posted into the GL. So until a journal entry is approved, it does not show in the GL, which is good. It will not post. It has to post after the approval. If we don't have the approvals in place and I submit the journal entry, it's available on the financials or any report to run because it goes straight to posted, but nobody took a look at an attachment. Nobody took a look at the entry. Nobody knows whether I coded it correctly, unless then we're reviewing financials. That's probably where we catch it. So these are approvals that are awesome to catch those issues way before closing, if you will. And then to add on to that, we also receive, I set myself up to receive an email notification. This is where I initially had mentioned Intacct is great at sending emails. So my approver probably got an email saying, hey, you have a journal entry number 3 ready for your approval. And then once it was approved, I got an email back saying, hey, so-and-so has approved your transaction number 3. And as you can see on the left side, picture, there's a click here to view the journal entry. If I'm already in Intacct doing something else, and if I click that link, it already takes me to that journal entry, which, as you can see, is what's opened on the second screenshot there. And it shows that my entry was approved and all is good. So that's what that communication looks like, in case somebody was curious what the emails look like. Then the other really cool thing that we can do in Intacct, whether it's, and this only applies for journal entries and accounts payable only. It doesn't apply to purchase orders. Somebody can actually approve through their phone. And this is good and bad. And ideally, I've seen this done when somebody is on vacation and they need to be able to approve things and keep things moving. So in this case, if there's no person to really hold the fort down while somebody's on vacation, then we can still approve journal entries through and accounts payable through the phone. You just log in as you would log in into Intacct on your phone, and then you go through the usual screens that you would go through. As you can see, this is a screenshot from my phone showing you the very same screen that we would go through in Intacct. So that's nice to have that option. You can do that on the fly, and this is just an EP. This is just a GL sitting in there ready for me to approve it, if you will. Then it also is the same case for accounts payable. I can go in and approve some bills to keep them moving from my queue. However, ideally, it would be really great if somebody's taking time off to really take time off. And in that case, Intacct has this ability, and this is only in the GL module only. We have this ability to turn on a delegate. What that means is if I'm the main approver for the general journal entries queue, if you will, and I want to take a 2 weeks vacation and I won't have internet access, I can have my backup, who is, let's say, Stuart in this case. I can delegate, I can turn on the delegate feature, and I can have Stuart take over for me. And as soon as that delegation is turned on, any new journal entries that flow through that queue will go straight to Stuart for approval. That way I can really enjoy my vacation, if you will. The other good piece of segregation of duties here in the GL is that if I am an approver, but I also need to enter a journal entry, I can also have a substitute person, and that's the person who would now approve my journal entry. So I approve other people's journal entries on a normal day, but if I wanted to put in a quick adjustment or something like that, or if one of my people is on vacation and I need to put in an entry, I can submit the journal entry, but then somebody else would approve it for me. So it goes one step lower or further down, which is nice to have. And that's really it. That's all I have for journal entries and accounts payable approval flow. I had to keep it generalized because people have different needs. And so for us to kind of give you a much more better recommendation of what would work best for you, it's probably best to reach out to us. But then in a nutshell is kind of how things work in Intacct in the world of approvals. So I am open to hear any questions, unless Stuart, you took care of them.
There's 2 questions that came in. I'll hit one of them. I'm going to give you the second one. The first one, I'll do the second one. But there was a question: will this feature be in AP? Will this feature be available in AP in the future? So what you showed, everything was available today in the system.
Correct.
So, so the only thing that might be preventing that is that if you have like a different product, but everything that she went over today is now built into the product. So this was nothing was vaporware, or nothing was for future releases. So the delegation invoice for approval, that's I don't want to give out your name, so I will have Carol follow up with you, because I know that you work with Carol, and I'll have her follow up with you on that. And then the second thing, one of the questions about vendor approvals, just to FYI, vendor approvals, the actual setting up of vendors and approving the vendor setup, that is actually going to be released in the release that's coming out this weekend. So Friday night, remember that R3 is coming out. And if you, one of the new features in there is vendor approval. So we're excited about that feature as well.
Correct. It's not released yet, so I was debating whether I should add it or not, but you are correct. That would be an additional level of approvals for vendors being set up in the AP world in Intacct.
Perfect. Well, like normal, you did a great job, Carol. Unfortunately, looks like I have a lot of invoices now to approve, thanks to all the testing you've done over the last last couple weeks. But thank you for putting this together. As you can see, she's put the list of webinars that are coming up. So again, we have next Thursday we have our R3 release, so we can teach everyone that. That does include the vendor compliance, which is a new module or new feature within construction, and we will be going through that process. Next month, we're going to be going over bank feeds, a fun little topic there, and then we'll also be going over some payroll tips and tricks next month as well. So again, we've got some cool ones scheduled through the rest of the year. So feel free to email myself, or feel free to email Carol, whose email will be on the next page of the webinar, the PowerPoint. If you have any questions, again, Carol, thank you for putting this together. Great job.
Thank you.
Awesome. And I will be following up with those who have asked for things in the chat. So have a great day, everyone. Thank you for attending, and stay safe out there. Take care.